Hello, my name is Crystal Petry, and welcome to season 3 of the Crystal Petry Podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about moms and entrepreneurs. I know there's a kind of a mash of words for that, Jenna, but I can't think of it now. Is it mompreneur or something like that?
Mompreneur, yes, yes.
Yeah. We have Jenna Rykiel on the podcast today. She is both a mom and an entrepreneur. So she is going to explain the good, the bad, the crazy, the stressful, the happy when you want to do both. But it's possible, right, Jenna? It's possible to do both.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, yes. Okay, so Jenna, where in the world are you?
I live in Maryland, right in between DC and Baltimore in a place called Columbia, Maryland. My husband and I moved back home to this area from Denver, Colorado, to when we wanted to start our family. But we lived in Denver for 6 years and miss it. But we love Maryland too. Love being by family.
Excellent, excellent. You need the support circle. The support circle.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Support and also, kids growing up with cousins. That's another
Right.
thing. My dad was one of 8, so I had so many cousins. I mean, obviously, I still have a lot of cousins and
Mhm.
family, and we all live in this area. So it's really nice to be back and have my kids growing up with their cousins.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about you, Jenna, so that my audience will know. As they do know, I always get the best of the best on my podcast because I want to make sure they are getting the best information and education possible. So obviously, you are a mom and you own a business. So tell us, how long have you been doing both?
Yeah, absolutely. So for my son was born, my first son was born in 2022, and my second son was born 4.5 months ago. So I
Congratulations.
am a fairly new mom of two, and with the business, so a little bit, prior to working in the business, I worked in the mental health field for a little while. I worked in corporate for over a decade, and then left corporate in 2021, but started my business in 2017. And there's, certainly a story to be told about, those years in between 2017 and 2021, something that I help moms overcome now that I've been through it. But really, I love helping moms transition out of corporate, the safety and the stability that we feel
Yes.
in corporate, and being able to create a life that they love outside of the confines and the structure of corporate.
Why did you decide? This is a two-part question, Jenna. Why did you decide to leave your corporate traditional job? And
Mhm.
why did you decide to start your own company?
Yeah. So it goes hand in hand, I guess. I mean, it was always, if I was going to leave corporate, I would have my own business because I love working in the sense that I love that part of my identity. I love being able to, put my strengths and my value out in the world in these ways that come from my brain and how I think and how I can be creative. So, but why I left corporate was because I had a vision for my life that was more mobile, and was more um, flexible than corporate would ever offer. And I knew that the way that corporate is structured would not be aligned with how I wanted to show up as a mom. So I left corporate prior to becoming a mom, just before becoming a mom. Um, but I knew from seeing other, women in my company that corporate just isn't designed to for mothers, and for parents, really. I mean, you know, the work days until 5 or 6, and schools and daycare let out, around 3 or 4, right? So it's just not designed to with moms in mind, and I knew that I had a different vision for the life that I wanted to build.
Now, of course, if you are a mom, if you're working in corporate, this is not a bash against you or saying that you are less than a mother. This is just the experience and the lived experience of what Jenna has encountered in her life. How do you balance being a mother and owning your own business? You are a business coach, correct?
Yes, business and mindset coach.
Okay. And how do you balance being a mom and owning your own business?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many things. It's kind of a loaded question, but one of the most important things that I do in my life and that I make sure all my clients do, and also this isn't just for owning a business, this is for everyone in the world really, but it's making sure that you are setting aside time to plan. And that sounds so simple, but planning to me is really about living a conscious and deliberate life, which means we're doing the things and we're spending our time in ways that align with how we want to be living, right? So, no matter what kind of work you're doing, no matter where you're at in your life, you want to be thoughtful about how you're spending your time. And especially when you're balancing two really important responsibilities, business and motherhood, you want to make sure that you're helping out your your future self by just having a plan and being thoughtful about how you want to spend your time. So that I think is number 1 in terms of balancing, making sure that I'm building in family time, making sure that I'm spending enough time on certain projects in the business, on certain clients, in certain areas, right? And on me, right? Like that spending certain times where I can have my own reflection, get ready for the day, move my body, all the things that help me to perform at my highest potential. I really have to think ahead and dedicate time to plan that out, or else it just doesn't happen. Or else it just doesn't happen. Simple as
When
that.
you say plan, are you like writing your stuff down in a planner or maybe on your phone, putting in the notes, or how are you like physically doing that? Or is it just something that like mentally, you're mentally taking note? I need to do this. I need to do this.
That's a great question. And this really gets into the meat and potatoes of, the first tool that I teach my clients, which is a process I called Monday Momentum. And what it entails is scheduling 60 to 90 minutes prior to your week starts for a planning period. And I tell people if you can make that happen, move mountains to make that happen, right? Get childcare just for those 60 minutes. It will make the rest of your week so much smoother. So, and your life so much smoother, right? So, we have that planning period where it's just like our time and it's a sacred space. And what I recommend doing is a to-do list download. So you write down on a blank sheet of paper, pen and paper, all the things you need to do. And then what you're going to do with that list is schedule it. It sounds so simple, but what I find most people do is they have this long to-do list, what most moms do, have this long to-do list. It keeps growing, right? And for every one thing that comes off, there's 5 things that come on.
True.
And it can
It's true.
create a lot of overwhelm and tension. And then we freeze or we avoid doing things or we do the easy things first. And so what I recommend doing is getting it all on paper and then we just schedule it. Because when we're scheduling things on, let's say, Sunday during nap time or Sunday evening after bed, that part of our brain is is the prefrontal cortex, and it's the best part of our brain to utilize when we're planning. Now, in the moment, so when the week starts, and if we're expecting ourselves to just figure it out as we go, we're using a primitive part of our brain that will always opt for the easier thing, the more fun thing, or opt for Netflix, right? Or going to grab a
Yes.
snack. We all get distracted in the moment. So, what we want to do is take care of that person who's in the middle of the week and have them almost make zero decisions once they get into their week. They almost become a robot. And so that is the process that I have people follow, and they throw away that list. Now, throughout the week, there's different ways, you can text yourself things that come to mind, or have a notes app, or keep notes on a computer, however you do it, or on a post-it note. But those things that pop into your mind, they go on to the next planning period, right? So the Sunday following, you'd have your little post-its and all your little gatherings of to-dos, and then they'd go on that to-do list download that gets scheduled.
One thing that you stated, Jenna, normally whenever people say, do something that your future self will thank you for, they're thinking about like years and years in advance. But the way you phrased it and the way I love it is, let's look at the week. Let's do something that your future self will thank you for the week, the next week, or this week. And I think it's more tangible, and it allows you to really hone in and say, you know what, I can do this, instead of, okay, 5 years down the line, and it's one week, which is so much better.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I mean, your future self, 5 years from now is going to be happy that you planned out, this week, right? But it's also even just like your tomorrow self is going to be happy that you planned out this week, right? Waking up and not having to think about, okay, what's the most important thing to do today? Because that's a ton of mental Olympics when we already have so much going on. So yeah, your 5-year older self, your 10-year older self, they're going to be happy as well. But why not make this week's future self happy too?
Exactly, exactly. Now, Jenna, you are a business and mindset coach. If people want to get in touch with you, there's a mom out there that's listening right now that needs help. How can they get in touch with you? I know you have a website. What is that site?
Yeah, so it's Jenna.coach. Easy enough.
That
Not
is
even a
very
.com or a .org. It's Jenna.coach. And I also have a podcast.
okay.
So the podcast is How to Quit Your Job, a mom's guide to creating a life and business you love. So that is also where people can learn more about me, learn more about the strategies I'm talking about today, and also get inspired to take action and start making this happen.
Excellent. And your Jenna for the website, it's JENNA
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Correct, correct. So what does, and I use this word loosely, typical, what does a typical day look like for you as a mompreneur?
Yeah. So again, just to reiterate the point, it's when I wake up, I really want my day to be planned out. So even if, you know, well, usually every day is a little bit different, of course, but every day is planned out. And what I normally like to do is before 10 a.m., because I usually don't start business client work until 10 a.m. That's a boundary I've created. I like to, of course, take care of the kids, get Adley off to daycare, get Jude, my second born, set up for his first nap before the nanny gets here, and all of those morning things. But I also with the kids, but I also like to include some movement for me, and also some time for reflection. Now, of course, it doesn't happen every morning, but that is what I'm aiming for before I get into my business work at 10 a.m. Um, and then usually I try to do, I have clients at different times throughout the day, but I usually like to have one block, at least an hour, that I have quick to do items. And again, I plan these out on Sunday, but things that take maybe 5 minutes or less that I can just go through and chip away at and get done, maybe even like 10 or 15 in an hour. I bunch them all together, and it's a huge momentum builder for me to get through. And then I also like to have every day, um, maybe not every day, depending on how many clients I'm seeing each day, but 2 hours worth of focus time. So, focus time is really where I'm creating a result and moving any type of business project forward. So right now, I've been putting together a group coaching membership program, and there's a lot of back end stuff. There's a lot of marketing stuff, and it requires a lot of my brain and a lot of focus. So, as many days as possible in the week, in the work week, I like to have those 2 hour chunks to really allow myself to get into sort of like a flow state of work. Um, the other thing too is I always recommend my clients, and I, follow it myself, is having blocks of time that are family time. So even if that is like a morning getting kids ready or an evening dinner and bedtime, having it known like when you are going to be present and available and ready to focus on the family, so that you aren't feeling like you have to be checking email or that you have to be responding to DMs on social media, right? It's like you want to be very intentional about that time. And then the last thing is I talk about connection as well, and connection in the sense of, you know, networking with people, setting up one-on-ones, coffee chats. That is a huge part of business, as you know, and it's not necessarily to get clients. It's to build this network of supporters and people who know you and trust you, so that down the line, there might be something that they can help you with. And oftentimes it's not necessarily recommending a client. Sometimes it's, listening to a podcast episode. Maybe it's leaving a review on your podcast. Maybe it's, promoting or reposting something that you're launching. So I always recommend, and I always try every day to have some sort of connection that I'm making, whether it be quick emails to people following up that I haven't talked to in a few weeks or months, or coffee chats, or attending networking events. I try and do that consistently as an entrepreneur.
Two things I want to follow up on something that you said, Jenna. The first one, you said that you have started and you have created boundaries for yourself. Explain to myself and to my audience, number one, why is that so important, creating those boundaries? And number two, how do you enforce them for yourself and for other people?
Yeah, boundaries are so important. And I feel like it's kind of a buzzword that we heard or are hearing a lot more after 2020 and COVID, and really this focus on self-care. But it is so important. And boundaries aren't so much what you want other people to do. Boundaries are what you do. So you always have control. So even if it's a boundary around, like, a perfect example is not starting my day until 10. Now, if somebody were to reach out to me before 10, the boundary is not about who can reach out to me before 10. They're, more than welcome to reach out to me before 10. It's when I will respond and when I will read it. And this was such a big thing in corporate, because prior to my career in coaching moms to actually leave corporate and start their own business, I coached leaders to prevent burnout. And boundaries is such an important puzzle piece of that, because you will have members of your team and you will have your leaders reaching out outside of the boundaries that you've set for yourself. And there's no problem with that per se, as long as you stick to your boundaries and you stick to what you've developed for yourself of, okay, this is when I read this is when I respond. So boundaries are really you understanding what you need and creating a system to allow you to do that. For my moms, it's often around how much we're working in our business because the work is never done and it can often feel never ending. So figuring out how to build a schedule that does allow us to feel like we're not putting our family life on hold while we get this thing up and running. Because if the goal of starting your own business is so that you have more time with your family, like there's absolutely no reason why you have to wait to have more time with your family until this thing is up and running, right? We can build that in with boundaries. Without boundaries, there's so much resentment that happens, right? So not only is it setting boundaries, but then it's honoring your own boundaries. And us moms, we have problems and troubles doing that, right? Myself included. It's like, yes, I set this boundary, but I also need to do X, Y, and Z for other people. And so it's committing to you being number one. You have to put on your own, mask first on the flight before you assist other people. And that is how this works as well. You have to fill up your cup first and focus on what you need before you can be the best version of yourself for other people.
Walk us through this, Jenna, because I feel like I can hear my audience, especially my mom, saying, I set this boundary of, no business, no work before 10 a.m. But, a client calls or clients call, and I don't want to miss out on a potential sale, or I don't want to miss out on a guaranteed sale, or I really need to check this email. So, how do we get out of our own heads, so to speak, with setting boundaries, but also wanting to break them for fear of missing out?
Yeah. Well, the most important word there is fear, right? So, and we want to be doing things not from a place of fear. We want to be doing things and taking action from a place of, be it love or confidence, love for ourselves and confidence in our decisions. So we need to also check in, and this is the mindset piece of this, right? Because yes, when we have a client reach out, we feel like we need to immediately get back to them because there's a fear we might lose them, right? And then we might lose income.
Yes. Yes.
And and so with that, what I always recommend is checking that, challenging that. Like, what is the worst thing that could happen? Right. And it was interesting. Just before this, I had a session with a client, and it was, she's working Saturdays and Sundays because there's this long to-do list that she created and she needs to get it done. And my question is then, why? Why do you need to get that done? Right. And it's an interesting question if we just ask ourselves why. That question is so important because the why do we need to get things done, or why do we need to respond immediately to this person, it has us misaligned with why we even wanted to start a business, right? The flexibility and the putting our family first
Right.
potentially and the putting ourselves first, right? A lot of my clients want to be able to put themselves first and feel like the environment in corporate isn't supporting that. And so once we get curious about that and we answer that for ourselves, then we can approach that solution with a little bit more knowledge and understanding and hopefully grace. Now, if we are worried that we are going to lose a client because we don't respond immediately, that means we need to have more communication at the forefront of working with clients around what the expectations are. You can easily say, you can reach, and I do this with my clients because they have text and email support in between our sessions. And I say, you have access to me at any time, but I have 24 to 48 hours to get back to you, right? That gives
Wow.
me a
Yes.
buffer period so that I'm not feeling like I need to respond immediately. And do I normally
Yes.
respond sooner? Of course I do, because it's fun and exciting for me to be doing this. And if I'm not with my family and if I'm not, working on something else in that moment, of course, I will respond and celebrate those wins and
Mhm.
address those challenges. So, but we need to understand that why piece instead of just letting the sentences in our heads of, oh no, I need to do this um, out of fear, just run rampant, right? We have to have that mind management, is what I call it.
Now, something else that you spoke about was making time or planning time to be with your family so that you can be present. You're not answering emails, checking DMs, answering the phone, things like that, but scheduling that piece. Why is that so important? Because I feel like when moms quit their traditional jobs and they stay home, everything then becomes, as far as the business, becomes on them. The marketing, the HR, the finance, like
Hmm.
everything is on them. But one of the main reasons that most women, moms, will quit their job is so they can have more time with their family. But a lot of times that is not what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important to keep that piece in check. And a couple of things come to mind, and that is the one thing, and this is kind of um, good for this time of year, right? We have all these goals and all these resolutions, and even just with a goal or resolution, I think it's so important to ask yourself why. I recently had a client who wanted to make 200K in her business, which is great. We all have had an innocent revenue goal, and the why was so that she could spend more time with her family, right? And when we chip away at it, it's like, well, let's figure out ways for you to spend more time with your family now. So she takes off or takes a half day on Wednesdays to be with them. um, but so we ask ourselves why with any goal so that we don't go down a path where we are putting our all into a goal that has us miss our future self who has hit that goal misaligned with who we
Correct.
want to be, right? We need to be aligned with that. But then also a really quick, easy tool, especially if you're sold on the scheduling thing that I opted for earlier or told earlier, is to plan your free time first, always, right? When you look at your week and you look at your to-do list, and make sure that personal and family stuff is on the to-do list, right? If you want to go to the water park with your kids, making sure that that's written on the to-do list, and then making sure that that's the first thing scheduled, right? So you make sure that those things are getting hit because or getting done because those are the important things, right? And to live a conscious and deliberate life is to plan for those things that you want to do that make life feel fuller. So you plan those things first. Another thing I always recommend is to plan out your weekends. And I know people don't want to do that because they feel like my weekends are just like, I want to like have freedom, right?
Yes.
But we need to detach this idea of freedom from this idea that scheduling creates less freedom, because scheduling actually creates more freedom because we are then doing the things that make us feel free, right? I'm sure we all had the experience where we get to the Sunday night or we get to Monday and we're like, I didn't do any of the things I really wanted to get done this weekend, right? Whether it be
Right.
house projects or
Yes.
going to the park or whatever, reading a book, right? And that's because when the weekend starts, we are like drinking from a fire hose. We are just reacting to everything that's coming to us, right? Before you know it, the kids are napped and then they're woke up and then the day's gone. And then the next day comes and goes. And we're like, weekends, they just fly by. But if you are
Yeah.
intentional about what you want to get done on the weekend, and it doesn't have to be work, right? It actually shouldn't be work in my mind, but the actual fun things, you move through the weekend so much more intentionally, and it's amazing. So planning out your weekends is a top tip that I would recommend as well.
Excellent, excellent. What are, and you've been doing this, I know you started your own business in 2017, you became a mom in 2022. What has been some challenges and some obstacles that you have had to endure during that period of time, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So if I think back to the business that I started and honestly, it comes to mind because it was a failure in 2017, right? Like, and I always like to talk about that because I didn't have the mindset tools at that time. I had the degrees, I had the certifications, I had the motivation, but without the mindset piece, and mindset being things like a new relationship with failure, mindset being a way to understand how your thoughts are creating your results ultimately, right? Like self-doubt and imposter syndrome and being overwhelmed by so much to do, right? I didn't have that back in 2017, and so I started my business. I had like a couple of clients and needed to create my website, and I couldn't figure out how to create the website. And then I just gave up, right? I was like, let me go back to corporate, or not go back. It was like, this is something I was doing on the side, my business. So I could retreat and be comfortable again, right? And I made it mean, and this is what, we often do. We make things mean something about us. So the fact that I couldn't build a website, or, yeah, I couldn't figure it out, is I made it mean that I wasn't supposed to have a business. I wasn't meant to be an
Oh,
entrepreneur,
okay. I get
right?
that. Yes.
And we do that so often with these arbitrary things, right? I mean, you can pay someone to build a website. I have an entire episode actually on why you don't need a website to start a business, right? Like you just need a way for people to get in touch with you. You need to meet people, tell them what you do, right? So, but that was a challenge, right? It was challenges like that really got in the way of me having what I would call a successful business back then, right? I was coaching, I had clients, it was on the side, but I wasn't going to take this risk of leaving corporate because I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur because of these what I thought of as obstacles where I now
Right.
just laugh at, right? It's like now with the proper mind management, we know we can figure out anything, right? Like if we get to a point where any obstacle is figure outable, then we're unstoppable, right? And
Mhm.
there's tons of obstacles I still have today in my business, but it's a new perspective on them. I'll also say that, of course, 2020 and COVID, you can't talk about that time period without talking about that
Right.
challenge. But wrapped up in that, I would say the challenge of working in corporate, leading a team, being really what felt like their therapist through that, and what felt like me not giving myself what I needed through that time period, which was, stressful for every single person on the planet. Um, that it was really the breaking point that I was able to look in the mirror and say I needed to make a change. I needed to stop setting myself on fire to keep other people warm, kind of
Mhm.
thing. And that is where I decided to hire my own business coach and career coach to actually get more organized and get more direction and clarity and accountability around this vision I had for my life. So there's and the conversation of mistakes or failures or challenges is so interesting to me now because I wouldn't change any of them right now looking back in hindsight. Every single really tough period in the business or a really tough period in life, it teaches us so much. There's so much to learn. And so, the business that I have today and the success I have today doesn't happen without that freak out about website design and building in 2017.
I've heard it said so many times, you hear it in movies and you hear it just in life. When you pray for the sun, expect the rain. You
Mm,
have to have
mhm.
both. You have to
Yeah.
have the success and you have to have the failure in business. You have to.
Yeah. Success is I forget who said the quote, but success is built on thousands of mini failures, right? And like
Mhm.
that's true. And I that is a concept that I'm constantly going through with my clients because the more we know what doesn't work, the closer we get to what does work. So business planning and coming up with a plan and our to-do list and what's going to drive our business forward is number one, or maybe not number one in my coaching, probably number three. But anyway, it's a pillar of my
Mhm.
coaching. But we have to know that, you know, our skills and our interests and our experiences and all of that come into play where that plan might not work. And we have to be resilient enough to pivot and to design the next step, knowing that just because that didn't work doesn't mean this isn't a good idea or this isn't going to work entirely. It just means now we put that in the folder of something that didn't work and now we try something new. We almost become like scientists, right? We are testing hypotheses every single day in our business. And scientists don't necessarily, feel offended when something doesn't work or they don't take it personal, right?
I
They
feel like they
it's
expect it.
it's it's data, right? It's like
Yes.
you just report the data, what happened, and it helps you to influence then the next experiment.
Right. Right. As a business and mindset coach, Jenna, how do you coach your moms who feel like they have to do it all? Just them, like the
Mhm.
burden is just on them and they have to do it all.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that if you think you have to do it all, like it's probably because you are creating an environment where you are doing it all, right? And this isn't to say, because I know that, there's different levels of help that partners give, there's certain
Mhm.
accessibility to family, right? All of that is a variable. And I'm not really even talking about that. I'm talking about the help that you design. So every single thing that you could ever do in your business, there's definitely somebody you can hire, right? Now, we might not feel ready to invest in our business, which is a mindset issue, right? It's like we don't feel like our business is mature enough for us to invest in it. We don't see the return on investment of hiring a team or hiring even just somebody to help out with marketing or even a business coach, right? It's like there are opportunities and there are people available, but we have some of our own resistance, some of our own mental drama that we need to work through, right? So there's somebody that you can hire for literally anything that you need to do in your business. If you're not ready to hire, there are so many other people out there who are willing to help, that are willing to be a part of your what I call board of directors,
Mhm.
right? So and those are free or they can be free, right? It's networking with other mom entrepreneurs. It's, even bartering services, being able to say, I will help you with this, which is my zone of genius, to for you to help me with something that's your zone of genius. So many people that I've met, mom entrepreneurs in my network, not clients necessarily, but other moms who own businesses, we've developed such strong bonds and relationships, and we get together, monthly or weekly or how whatever the cadence is to just brainstorm and strategize, right? So it's really creating this space and environment where you're not doing it alone, where you have people. Now, even if you have that, even if you have help from your partner, even if you have help from your family, you can get into the mindset of I'm doing this all alone. And what I would recommend is really understanding this because um, this sounds a bit harsh, but it's a form of victim mentality, right? It's this form
Wow,
of
I've never heard that
um,
before, but I
yeah,
get
it's
it.
this, yeah, right. And it doesn't help us to get into that space where we just see everything as we have to do everything. We are underappreciated. We are, and those things might be true, right? But nothing is ever 100% true. That is not a fact, right? There are a lot of stories that we tell ourselves, and they either serve us or they don't serve us. So even if you do drop off and pick up and make dinner and are caring for your elderly mother and are doing the bills and doing your business, right? Even if those things are all things that you're doing, thinking about it in this way of I have to do it all creates a feeling of resentment, creates a feeling of frustration, of anger. And then we're not creating the results that we want because we're spending so much energy in that space of, like I said, victim mentality. It's I'm in the business of helping moms get energy, right?
Mhm.
And part of that is figuring out where our energy is being depleted. And so much of that can be in our control with just how we're seeing our life and how we're seeing our role and the role that we play in our family and business.
I have spoken with several entrepreneurs, whether on the podcast or just in everyday life, Jenna. And one of the main things that they all talk about, and this is male and female, is the isolation. Because when you are in a traditional corporate 9 to 5, 8 to 5 job, there's always people around. There's always people coming into your cubicle or into your office. There's someone calling. Like, you always have people around. And when you become an entrepreneur, then there's no one around. For the most part, there's no one around except for you. How do you navigate those feelings of isolation, and how do you overcome them?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of similar to my answer to the last question. It is to create less isolation. Certainly there's going to be scenarios where you do feel isolated, right? Where you are working on a challenge and it's just you, or you are the CEO, CMO, CTO,
Yeah.
right, of your business.
Yes.
You're also HR, you're all the things. But I've found that, early on I had a commitment to meeting people, and not just people, but other entrepreneurs, right? And so on a weekly basis, I would say, and maybe not weekly now in my business, but certainly the first um, few years of it, I was constantly in networking calls. I was constantly with other entrepreneurs, other mom entrepreneurs. I even host a free mom entrepreneurs group. And part of that is so that you can hear other people saying the thing that you're going through, right? And you can say out loud the thing that's isolating, and then have other people say, I feel that same way too, right? There's so much, like, isolation, I feel like is an emotion that we feel. Like, we feel like, especially when we're a solopreneur, when it's just us, that we are taking on all the responsibility and all the things ourselves. But we have to cultivate this network of people who understand what we're going through, who have seen the similar challenges, who have gone through what we're going through. If it's a mom entrepreneurs group, that's even better if you're a mom. But really, any networking or any network that you cultivate of other business owners is going to be beneficial. Same thing with why we join mom groups in general, right? For anybody, maybe take away the entrepreneurship part. It's like you go into maybe a group of moms and you're all talking about breastfeeding, let's say, and the challenges around breastfeeding or the challenges around finding childcare, and you feel less alone, that every single other person has gone through and is still going through the same things that you are, right? And so you may have felt isolated in one scenario, but by being committed and intentional about keeping those conversations going with people experiencing and people who get it, um, those feelings of isolation are shorter lived. I would also say, like, bring in people in your world, right? It's like your partner might not understand what it means to have a certain open rate in your email newsletter or something like that, but at least like
It's so
bringing them
important.
at least bringing them in and trying to explain it and getting excited about it and being open about things you're doing in your business. Now, my husband is an entrepreneur. He's never worked in corporate. He's always been an entrepreneur. So I don't have to explain to him what an email open rate is, but it has been so important to bring him into my business, right? Bring him in the way of like sharing my successes, talking to him about my challenges. And, I promise it doesn't have to be somebody who's also an entrepreneur to talk with you through your challenges. Isolation is often, cured by us just communicating more and connecting more with people.
Mhm. What do you say for people who don't celebrate their wins? Maybe it's something small, maybe it's something big, but they don't feel like they have time to celebrate their wins, or maybe they should not celebrate their wins. I remember I'm an Oprah stan, and my audience knows this by now. I love Oprah Winfrey. But when she had her talk show, she said, like, one of the when she got the talk show, and she seemed like she was going to be successful with it, the first thing she did to like celebrate that was to buy herself like some really fancy nice towels to celebrate
Mhm.
the win of the Oprah Winfrey show being successful, or whatever the case was. But that's how she celebrated herself, and that's how she celebrated her win. How important is it to acknowledge your wins, to celebrate your wins when you are, especially an entrepreneur, especially a mompreneur?
Yeah, I mean, celebrating is so important, and celebrating doesn't have to be buying anything or, a real large show of celebration, but what's most important about this in general is that you are enjoying the process and seeing the process as the wins, right? Because we all, not everybody has this very defining moment where, their show is on cable television, or they, signed the contract to get their show, or, the success of the show, right? What it looks like for most of us is we have this goal, let's say to get our first client. And then we get our first client, and immediately when we get that first client, we're like, well, this is fine, but that client is, that was luck. So I need to get 5 clients, right? And then I'll be successful, or then I can celebrate. And then we get 5 clients, and we just keep moving the goalpost. That is what we do. And we do that because we want to keep stretching ourselves, and that's great,
Right.
right? But the more we do that without pausing and really allowing ourselves to see all that we've accomplished, the more we get closer to burning ourselves out, because nothing will ever be good enough, right?
Right.
Because with burnout, part of it, it's not just exhaustion, it's also achievement, right? That's one of the 3 pillars of it. There's exhaustion, cynicism, and a lack of self-efficacy, which is not seeing yourself as being good at your job, right? And if we do not find moments where we can pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, you did a good job, right? You signed that client, or you sent that newsletter or that email, and that was scary, right? You did it anyway, or you made that post, you know, congratulations, like good for you, right? Let's
Yes.
celebrate. Let's, make ourselves a tea, or let's go for a walk, or let's listen to, something that we love. If you don't have those moments, then you will just constantly feel like you're not good enough, right? Like you still need
Right.
to prove yourself, and that will drain you. It will make the process so much less fun. And we really need to love the process, because there is never a time where we made it, right? There's never that moment where we are like wow, we did it. Now we can relax.
Oh,
We
yeah.
will just keep striving, right? Because that's the way we are mostly designed. So it's so important for the longevity of your business and of motherhood in general too. Like the celebrations need to happen in motherhood too.
Oh, that's true. That's true
Hmm.
because a lot of times with mothers, you're just going and going and going and going and going, and then they're graduating high school, and you're like, "What? What happened?"
Yeah,
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 yes.
right. And oftentimes, you are going and going, going, and then not stopping even to smell the flowers, right? Where you're not even stopping to notice the things to celebrate. When if that kid is, graduating from high school, there's so much to celebrate, right? They
Hmm.
were potty trained, hopefully. They are,
They tied their
functioning.
shoes.
They tie their shoes.
Yeah.
They can write their name. They can do so much, but yeah, it's often, we don't really stop and give ourselves time to reflect on those things and those wins.
When we were speaking yesterday, Jenna, I was telling you that my intention for this podcast was for moms who have started their business to let them know that you are not alone in this process. And a
Yeah.
lot of the things that you're feeling and thinking and going through are valid, and other people are feeling those same feelings and going through those same challenges and obstacles. But just for a moment, I want to talk about the moms who are actually thinking about quitting their traditional job and starting into this entrepreneurial space. What advice would you give that mom?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, not necessarily advice, but I always like to pull out this stat that 4.7 million businesses are owned by moms, which
Really?
is
I did not know that.
amazing. Yes, isn't that crazy? Um, and I like to talk about that because there is this thought that we can have that that we can't do something, or that it's there's so many obstacles. But if 4.7 million moms can figure it out, like the question is like, why not me, right?
Mhm.
um and so I like to start there with just knowing that it's possible, right? Because so many other
Mhm.
people have figured it out, and you're no
Right.
different than all those people. But then the next thing that I would recommend doing is um, really surrounding yourself or being intentional about meeting other mom entrepreneurs. Because oftentimes when we are in corporate or when we are somewhere else, we're not in that network, we don't know those humans, right? We're not in conversations with them. It can feel like such a different world, right? Like that's a world we just don't know. And then once we get intentional about meeting those people and hearing their stories and seeing that it's possible, it really changes things, right? We start seeing again that this is possible because I've met all of these people who have done this or are doing this, right? So there's ways to be intentional about joining groups, networking, just getting out there and meeting people who aren't in the same corporate world as you, or aren't in the
Mhm.
same, insert any job or title or what have you. And to also say, if somebody is um, the house manager, right, the stay-at-home mom running the family, like that person too. Very many of my clients are moms who wanted to stay home during the taking care of their kids for a certain um, until a certain age of their life, and then they're feeling like, okay, now I have some time and energy to dedicate to my own thing, and now I'm ready. So this includes those folks as well. But surrounding yourself with people who are doing the thing that you want to be doing, so that they become less of this person who's on a pedestal and more of this person who you can role model, right? And that you see yourself as. The other thing, I mean, it was how I really got out of my own way was hiring a coach, hiring somebody who was able to hold me accountable, give me clarity, give me direction, um, and then say, did you do that? Right. And initially, this
Right.
person too believed in me before I believed in me. Right. I felt so silly saying out loud, I want to start this coaching business.
Mhm.
And I just remember she was like, of course. Okay, let's do it. And I was like, wait, don't we have to don't we have to think of all the reasons why this wouldn't work and all
Yes.
the reasons that I shouldn't do that? And it was like, there was this person who just like didn't have any of that mental drama. And that is really what gave me the freedom to just go all in on this thing. And by all in, I mean like working on it while I was, still in corporate, before then going all in. But yeah, sometimes we need that person. And for me also, it was a lot of money at the time. And investing in myself was a way that my mind just changed. That I was like, okay, if I'm spending this money, I'm going to make this happen, right? There's this
Right.
financial commitment that we make. And that's true of anything with you in the ways that you invest in yourself, right? If you invest in a personal trainer, you're
Mhm.
probably going to get better results than if you just decide for yourself you're going to go to the gym. And part of that is because you've spent money, so you're going to make it worth it.
Right. Right. We are getting ready to wrap up, Jenna. So just a few more questions. How has being a mom, which I know you started your company before you became a mom, but how has being a mom helped you be a better entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it has so much to do with perspective and priorities, right? It's the business is just this fun thing that I do, and motherhood is this fun thing that I do too, right? But the kids and my family, they are number one, and you know, being able to understand the why of doing this more because it's right in front of my face, right? These
Mhm.
kiddos, and being able to choose them over the business in some moments
Right.
really helps to not only flex that boundary muscle, but also it makes me a better entrepreneur. It makes me a better role model for other entrepreneurs that my values are aligned and that my values come through in my actions, right? Like, who would I be as a mom and entrepreneurial coach if I was working all day, every day, right? And preaching to my moms to do it one way, but then they see me answering every email and text message the next
Yes.
second, right? Or not taking any time off or working during my vacations. It's, there is this part of me, I feel like that when I had kids that became a better entrepreneur because I was resting more, resting in the sense of resting from my business
Mhm.
and taking care of myself more because now it was so much more important, right, for me to be energized for my family. So, so much of being able to prioritize the right things for me and the important things has made me show up in my business so much more aligned with who I want to be.
Excellent. Two more questions and then we will be done, Jenna. What
Okay.
is your intention in this space of being a business and mindset coach for moms who are in or who want to become entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So really, I mean, this all kind of started from this wanting moms to have more fun, right? It's a sense of I feel like as moms, we are the timekeeper, we are the bag packer, we are the rule enforcer, right? We often get these we wear these hats of that are less fun, right? And part of that is working potentially jobs and having our career be a thing that we don't love, right? So we're putting um, other people, other things first, and putting our needs or wants or visions or goals to the side for the good of the family, right? And we often do that, right? We put ourselves last and we put everybody else first, or oftentimes that's what happens. And really wanting to get to this place where not only are moms having more fun just in, life in general, but also having more fun in their careers by taking this chance, what feels like a chance, to pursue this thing that feels so much more energizing and aligned with who they want to be and what they want to work on every day, right? And not to say that everybody needs a passion, but to have something that we are excited to be working on, excited to be testing and trying out. And I think that has a ripple effect in our families and in society. Thing that I said too was that moms really have great ideas that impact society, right? Like we have a pulse on not just what helps moms, but we have a pulse on what helps different other areas of the world. I mean, of society, right? We are tapped into those gaps because we're constantly aware and looking at what other people need, right? And that helps us to come up with really powerful, impactful business ideas too.
Excellent, excellent. And my final question for you, Jenna, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast, but you have to help me get them on?
Yes. So my husband would make a great guest on the podcast. His name is Chris. And like I said, he's been an entrepreneur since day one. He's definitely the type who, um, he thinks like an entrepreneur. Most of the people I work with, part of the coaching is getting them to see themselves as an entrepreneur. He's been an entrepreneur since day one, right? With seemingly no reservations. But he's also a really amazing father. He recently started a newsletter called the Anti-Fragile Dad, where it's a community to support dads, because there's actually a ton of support for moms out there, and then
Right.
there's what we find is like not enough, I think, conversations happening, honest and vulnerable conversations happening for dads. And if we do look at the evolution of dads, like right now in our society, dads are more present and more, involved than ever before. And I think that in a lot of scenarios, like there's just not enough conversations around that. So he's, a big supporter of supporting dads and a great person to talk to about all things business too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jenna, for being on my podcast and helping out mompreneurs.
Yes, I'm excited and I'm glad this, conversation is going to reach moms, whether they've
Yes.
started the business or are thinking about it. It's like sometimes you just need to hear that you can do it,
Mhm.
and
And
that
that you're
it
not
doesn't,
alone.
you're not alone. No, there's 4.7 million of us out here. So just find a couple, keep in touch with them, and help each other overcome those challenges.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for being on my podcast, Jenna, so much.
Thank you, Crystal. I'm so glad we were able to connect.
And to my audience and to my listeners, thank you so much for joining us. You can get Jenna's podcast on YouTube Podcast and Apple Podcast. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.